can tell a lot about a person just by looking at what dog they have at home. And if they have a Chihuahua, psychology has some very specific things to say. Not from judgment, from behavioral science. Because choosing a pet is never random. It reflects real emotional needs, concrete personality traits, and sometimes things that person doesn't even know about themselves yet. The Chihuahua is not just any dog. It's the smallest breed in the world, originally from Mexico, with a history that blends pre-Hispanic culture with legends of sacred animals used in ancient rituals. Over time, it went from ritual symbol to status symbol, then to fashion accessory, then to meme. But beyond the aesthetics, it has a temperament that consistently surprises people who don't know the breed. They're intensely loyal, to one person usually, suspicious of strangers, stubborn, brave, to the point of seeming completely unaware of their own size. They'll square up against dogs 10 times bigger without hesitating for a second, and they have a capacity for emotional attachment that very few breeds can match. All of that matters. Because when someone chooses a dog, they're not just choosing a shape or a size. They're choosing in some way an extension of something that already exists inside them. Research on pet owner psychology has spent decades trying to answer a deceptively simple question. Do we choose our pets, or do they choose us? The evidence points more toward the first option than most of us would like to admit. Breed choice is deeply connected to personality, emotional history, and a person's current needs. Not always consciously. Actually, almost never. There's a well-known study from the University of Bath where participants were asked to describe their ideal dog, and those descriptions were then compared against their own personality traits. The correlation was surprisingly strong. People who wanted loyal, protective dogs tended to place high value on emotional security in their own relationships. Those who wanted independent dogs scored high on personal autonomy, and those who wanted highly attached, clingy dogs frequently reported a stronger need for emotional connection in their daily lives. Which category does the Chihuahua fall into? Intense attachment. And this is where things start getting really interesting. One of the most consistent patterns in research on small dog owners is that they place enormous value on companionship. Not the passive presence of an animal sleeping in the corner, the real bond. The feeling of being seen, followed, needed. The Chihuahua delivers that in overwhelming quantities. It becomes your literal shadow. It learns your routines before you've even consciously registered them yourself. It picks up on your emotional state with an accuracy that honestly feels a little unsettling sometimes. For someone living alone, going through a major life transition, or coming out of a period where important relationships fell apart, that's not a dog. That's an anchor. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually one of the most natural and healthy functions of the human-animal relationship, but it's worth looking at closely. Within the personality model known as the Big Five, which is the modern psychological standard for mapping personality traits, small dog owners tend to score higher in neuroticism than owners of large breeds. And before you read too much into that word, neuroticism doesn't mean unstable or dramatic. It means elevated emotional sensitivity, a greater tendency to process things deeply, to worry more, to feel more. It's a trait that comes with real costs, yes, but also with genuine advantages. More empathy, deeper connections, a stronger ability to be emotionally present with others. And the Chihuahua, which is essentially an emotion-detecting device with legs, fits that kind of person almost perfectly. Something else shows up consistently too, this time in the agreeableness trait. People who score high in agreeableness tend to prefer animals that respond to their care in visible, direct ways. The Chihuahua is almost theatrical about this. Its gratitude, its attachment, the way it expresses affection, it's impossible to miss. For someone who needs to feel that their care matters, that their presence makes a difference, that constant emotional feedback has enormous value. Now, not all Chihuahua owners are the same. And this is important because the most common mistake is assuming a single profile when there are actually several, and they're quite different from each other. There's the protective owner, usually someone with a highly developed caretaking instinct. This might be an older person who found in the Chihuahua a being that depends on them completely. Or someone who went through a significant loss and redirected that affection toward a small, vulnerable animal. The bond here is almost parental. The dog isn't a pet. It's a chosen responsibility with real purpose behind it. Then there's the owner seeking pure emotional companionship, single, or simply someone whose human relationships don't fully meet their need for connection. They won't frame it that way, of course. They'll say the dog chose them, or that they have a special bond, and that's probably true. But underneath it is an unmet need for closeness that the Chihuahua fulfills with surprising efficiency. Then there's the practical owner, lives in a small apartment, travels frequently, has a life that simply doesn't accommodate a large dog. The Chihuahua is the logical solution. The psychology here is less dramatic, but just as real. This is someone who wants companionship without giving up their lifestyle. The choice reflects a high value placed on personal autonomy. And finally, there's the identity owner, the one who uses the dog as part of their personal image, dresses it up, takes it everywhere, integrates it into their whole aesthetic. This sounds superficial, but it really isn't. We all use external elements to communicate who we are. Clothes, cars, the neighborhood we live in. A pet is no different. And choosing a Chihuahua, with all the cultural weight it carries, is also a statement about something, even if it's not always obvious what. Now, let's talk about the myths, because there are several, and they're stubborn. The first one, that Chihuahua owners are shallow or frivolous people. This largely comes from the early 2000s pop culture image. Paris Hilton carrying a tiny dog in a designer bag, small, decorative, a luxury accessory. But that image captured a very specific cultural moment, not a universal psychological truth. The reality is that Chihuahua owners include war veterans using them as emotional support animals, elderly people recovering from illness, families with young children, and professionals across every field imaginable. The actual profile is far more diverse than the stereotype suggests. The second myth, that they're purse dogs without real personality, almost like toys. Anyone who has lived with one knows this is completely false. They are animals with an extremely defined personality, strong opinions about everything happening around them, and an ability to establish internal household hierarchies that sometimes puts much larger breeds to shame. A Chihuahua is not an accessory. It's a whole personality living in a very small body. The third myth, and this one is the most psychologically interesting, that their owners are always projecting weakness or insecurity. There's a cultural reading that associates small dogs with people who are compensating for something, who can't handle something more demanding, more intense. But the data doesn't consistently support that. What does appear is that many Chihuahua owners have a rich and complex emotional inner life, and that they chose, consciously or not, an animal that can meet that intensity without getting overwhelmed by it. Think about your own pet, or the one you'd choose right now if you could. Not the one you think you should want, the one you'd actually want. What does that say about what you need at this point in your life? Not as judgment, as information. Because that's exactly what psychology suggests. The companions we choose, human or animal, reveal the map of our current emotional needs. Not perfectly, not deterministically, but significantly. The Chihuahua, with everything it is, with its intensity and its almost absurd loyalty, and its tendency to become the center of attention without even trying, tends to find the people who need exactly that. A bond without ambiguity. A being that won't disappoint you, won't leave, won't be emotionally checked out.